What's up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm here with VibeSquaD in Vancouver, BC at the Red Room. And he's been nice enough to take some time out of his day to talk to us about the music business, music production, and how he writes his delicious psychedelic bass-heavy beats. Yeah, thanks, my friend. I hear you just came up from the US.
Yes.
You've been on tour with Opio for the last little while?
For 6 weeks straight.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's been quite a long journey.
And this is the last show of the tour?
It's the last show of the tour. I think we did 32 shows in a row.
Excellent.
So yeah.
I was kind of curious how that tour came together. How did you manage linking up with Opio, and how did you guys decide to work together?
Yeah, well, we met. I was on a tour, my first tour in Australia, and was paired up with him for a couple nights. He actually opened for me in Melbourne and in Sydney, and it was great because when I'm a big music fan of all different kinds of stuff, but when I heard him play before me, I did the rare can't stop talking to whoever I was talking to and walked straight to the front of the stage, like threw my sweatshirt down. I was like, no, this is my dude. And so I just really felt an immediate understanding for his approach, and he's just a funk dude like me, so we had a lot in common, which is why the Australian promoter put us together, and it just worked out way better than we even thought. So we became really good buddies, and right away started saying, oh, let's make remixes or do a track or something. And then he came over. Where was the next time we hung out? Shambhala, 2010. And we spent the whole weekend just roaming around, and people were teasing us, oh, the bromance, because we were just like on the same page and wanted to do some music together and wanted to like do a tour like this. And we're just kind of rare to find someone that's so close to your style, but that's totally different. Like literally, I wouldn't think you'd confuse one of like a VibeSquaD tune or an Opio tune if you heard them back to back ever, but somehow we're like really compatible. So there's like,
for sure,
no aspect of competition, and in my mind, and all kinds of aspects of similarities that we discovered, and we get along really well. So, I mean, I've traveled and toured for 20 years pretty much, and usually by the end of a long tour, I'm doing everything by myself and not eating with everybody, just trying to get some space. And we've pretty much eaten every meal together and hung out every night, raging, just having a great time and listening to each other's sets every night. So it's going amazing. And he's definitely, true friend and an inspiration. So it's, it's a continuous process, the two of us.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, a lot of people seeing this video will already know a lot about you. But I always like to go a little bit into the background. So, and as well, I mean, I've been following you for a while myself, but there's a lot of that I don't know about you.
Yeah.
I'm super curious about your background. Have you always been a musician, or is music?
Music's got me going when I was about 5 years old. I'm 41, so when I was 5 or 6, just listening to the radio, it was all I wanted to do. And I didn't even know that that's what I wanted to do. I just knew that I loved it, and I wanted to bang on pots and pans or play piano or like get some drums or be a Jimi Hendrix or whatever. And my parents, as nice and supportive as they've always been, just didn't understand really where I was coming from with that. So it was
Neither of your parents were musicians?
Well, they were more. My mom actually directed plays and was into show tune kind of stuff, and her dad was really big in the showbiz. He was a critic for the Chicago Sun-Times back before, a really long time ago. So he had a lot of musical friends, and it was always in there, and it was always something that was part of my family, but not rock music or pop music or certainly not electronic music and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a real solo journey, especially that early in time, to find my connection with it. And this was way before internet, and you just had to go to the record store and just figure it out for yourself. So always had a love for it. So I always loved music. At a really young age, I got into breakdancing and electro kind of funk that was coming out of, I was grew up in Chicago. So the Detroit and the Chicago house and the Detroit electro kind of stuff, it wasn't even genrefied at all at that point. But we would go, I had a big crate of 12 inches when I was 12 years old. You know, I was into it so
Were you
much.
playing vinyl?
Well, yeah,
I
I had my sister and my stereos, which had built-in turntables sitting next to each other. And we listened, there was a DJ on the radio at WNUR in Evanston, Illinois, named T. Chablis, who was like really good scratching, like hip hop, but all kinds of breakdance stuff, like Al Hashim and or Hashim, the Al Nafish, or however you say that. It's time. That was just my shit, man. I loved that stuff. So I loved that. I also loved like Pink Floyd and Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin and that kind of stuff. And when I got into high school, it was more like classic rock and Pink, you know, like Grateful Dead and stuff like that in the 80s, you know. And also tons of new wave and industrial. Being in Chicago, there was like, you know, Ministry and that type of stuff, like all kinds of goth, and you know, I was into that kind of stuff in high school, you know, Bauhaus and New Order and The Cure and Smiths, and I saw those bands play. So Fishbone was a big influence. So I was into live music first, but I always didn't separate that from electronic music.
When did you get into producing electronic music?
Started making hip hop beats early on using an MPC 60 when I was in a live band that needed some production, and the studio loaned me their MPC 60. So started with the little wheel, making little one-shot samples.
Yeah, the little menu.
And did that. And then I remember my friend, I have this great friend, Tucker, what up Tucker, who turned me on to drum and bass and copy of Ableton 101 or 1.0 and Reason when it first came. No, not Reason. What was it? Acid when it first came out.
Oh yeah.
Like 1999 electronic music software was pretty basic, and my computer skills were really basic. But he got me excited about that, and I just kind of stuck with it ever since then. I made a lot of really busy, really kind of shitty tracks for a long time. And
as everybody does at the beginning.
And then started to find my sound probably about 10 years ago.
Okay. How long had you been producing electronic music for before you felt like you were really like stepping into your own and found your sound?
Well, you know, I'd already made like probably 3 or 4 of my own albums, playing guitar, bass, drum, everything on them. Starting with 4-track recorders and then going to studios, and they were 16-track, and I did 24-track, and then ADATs came out. So I'd always had my hand in the studio. So when I started with the electronic stuff, I was still playing in bands. I was playing bass and guitar in bands, and a band I was in called Zilla was on the road, and I would just go back to the tour bus every night with headphones working on Reason and trying to get just really obsessed over it. And I had a real good, cool session with Lauren Bassnectar, who's been a friend forever. And we were on this thing called Jam Cruise, and really early, it was so long ago, and he said, hey man, let me listen to your beats that you're making. Would you want me to like listen and just let you know what I would do if I was like gonna play one of those or whatever, you know? I was like, yeah. And so we hung out, and he gave me some really good advice, and I kind of went to school for like a year by myself just on that one session of like simplifying and layering and making the adding mono like sine waves underneath my bass lines and stuff and all that, and just working on that. And so when I finally got to a point where I had made a couple of tracks, I sent them to him, and he started playing them out. And people were like calling me on the phone, being like, "Dude, Lauren's playing your track on New Year's at midnight, bro." And it was just really exciting. So that got me excited to make more. First, I had no vision of being performing it. I was already in so many bands and played tons of gigs playing guitar and bass. So, you know, but when I had 4 or 5 good tracks that all these DJs were playing, Uwa started playing it from the Glitch Mob, and all those homies started being like supportive and like excited about my tracks, and I was sending them to everybody. And then, and it was just kind of steamrolled from there. So I started getting calls for some basic gigs, some underground gigs, and then I used to play other people's tracks a bunch during my sets. But then I just decided I wanted to like fill it all up with my stuff and replace all those bangers with my own versions of that. And it was a process to go from like 2 or 3 songs to like, I don't know, I got like 120 or something at this point. So
excellent. Would you be open to talking a little bit about some of your in the studio stuff, like how you write your music? Because I know like that's something I'm curious about. It's something that a lot of people on the channel are curious about. Is like everybody's looking for knowledge. There's a lot of stuff out there. But the true masters like yourself who've been doing this for a long time and are really top of their game, sometimes it's hard to sit down and have a chat. You know, not everybody around the world can have time to be able to sit down.
Sure.
Because you guys are always so busy and highly sought after. So again, really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh man, my
and
pleasure.
to open up a little bit about your process. It's just so you know, it's very much appreciated.
Absolutely. And just so everybody out there knows, like I literally have played every day for almost 35 days. I played a show before the tour started, and just drove myself up today. We're going really hard. So if I seem a little out of it or a little tired, it's because I really am. And so I just hope you know that I appreciate you guys and I appreciate what you're doing here just as much. So if I seem a little weird, that's because I am a little weird right now.
Yeah,
but yeah, my process is basically like changed over the years, and it started off with when I started to hit my stride. It was definitely using Reason, and I really liked that because it was self-contained,
Right.
and I'm as guilty as anyone maybe about like if it's really open source, like or in the beginning, like using Cubase or Ableton, so many choices that I couldn't nail myself down and just get an arrangement done and just focus. I would preset surf like a synth for like 2 hours, and then I'd try like all these things and just kept adding so much and not being sure about where I was headed. And so Reason was cool for me in the beginning because it was just locked up and there was a couple synths in there and I just had to make it work, and I bring in samples that I would make in like Wavelab or whatever on the side, and I started recording a lot of field samples where I just go around with a little recorder and like bang on shit with a drumstick, or like I went to Home Depot and just played like junk up and down the hall, every aisle, everything, broomsticks,
Those are the
cinder
best
blocks,
samples,
metals,
hey?
and drawers of screws, and I just got a ton of material, like thousands, and I would just sit there cutting those up. And when I get really cool things, I'd put them in a folder just called like money sounds or something like that, or really like a starter folder. And that's really what worked for me the best, is I have these sounds that were all like the best that I had, and I could just choose them and be like, oh, that's awesome, like that one's,
And they're all original too.
yeah, and they were all original. And then I would do a lot of like sampling a synthesizer. If I liked the sound, I would obviously just like play it, and just chop up a little piece. So I had like the killer bass sound, and then I figured out how to make the kind of early VibeSquaD bass sound, and it was a saw wave sitting on top of a sine wave, and just in Reason, and I stacked them up, and I had this way of like kind of compressing them together and widening the top end, and that's kind of like where the dome piece, and there's probably like, I keep making that sound even today. Like even if I try a whole new synth, I end up with that
With that
sizzly
sound.
sound, yeah, saw wave sitting on top of a really monoed out mono sine wave. But then it's just the balance between the two that gives me kind of my signature sound, I guess. And then I use filters over the whole thing to kind of shape it. No matter how hard I try to make some totally original new stuff, I keep just creating that sound. Even if I use like additive synth or like FM, I keep coming up with like,
same stuff
that's what I like, is that sizzly bass sound,
Yeah.
But that's kind of thing. So Reason was good at that. Then I figured out how to, about 80% through the process, to bounce the Reason tracks into Cubase. Became my mixing mastering software. So I would take the audio in Cubase and do a lot of editing in there, and then add a few layers of other VST synths. Then I would allow myself to try stuff, and it was like icing on the cake at that point. So I would sit and preset surf at that point because I had a nice arrangement all together, So taking that from that 80% to finished was the hardest part. And for a while I was sending my tracks to Bill Bless to master them, and listening to a lot of stuff like Tipper and Cyveg and things like that.
Oh yeah.
And then Bill, I think he had a baby with his wife. He just stopped responding for just a short period of time, and I had a ton of gigs, and I really needed stuff mastered.
Your stuff
I
done.
just needed it. I was like really dependent on him, and I needed it. And so I just reverse engineered kind of what it sounded like he was doing, and was reading a lot of books. I read a book on mastering, and I read a bunch of articles on EQ and on stereo field and on loudness and on distortion and on all kinds of stuff, and just really went to it on a self-taught student kind of level, and figured out how to get stuff that wide and that big and that heavy but clean, you know.
So do you master your own tunes now?
Oh yeah,
you do.
Everything. Yeah.
I'm always curious about that.
Yeah. So now, you know, the evolution was kind of like, now I've made a bunch of tracks like just purely in Cubase. I've recently made a whole bunch of tracks just purely in Ableton. They always end up in Cubase for that final master though, because that's where I feel most comfortable finishing. I also bought a club style PA for my studio. My little studio is about the size of this room.
Yep.
And studio monitors were always a lot of guesswork for me.
Yep.
So for mastering, mixing, I thought I had it would good, and then I'd go to the club and the snares were like brittle, bright, awful, kind of be like harsh, and the kicks were flabby. And so when I bought these big speakers, I got a QSC, like the biggest ones that they had, not the K series, but right before that, the 215s and the horn, and then a big sub, and it just sits in this little room behind me, believe it or not. And I have the weirdest process these days, but when I hear that snare or that kick and it's sitting in the right zone and it's EQ'd properly or whatever, it's like, oh, there it is. And if it sucks, it's like, that sucks.
No.
So I've learned how to just say yes, no, yes, no. It's more of a binary experience, you know, versus like, well, maybe that's all right. There's no maybe anymore, you know. So that helps speed up and sharpen my process a lot.
What do you think it was about the PA system different from reference monitors that was able to give you that perspective?
Sounds like it does when I get to the club.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there was just no guesswork. The monitors are great for like a certain way of just hearing it that no one else is ever really going to hear it like that. But the fact that my music is just mostly played on loud sound systems, and when I started to play on like Function One and Turbo Sound and you know, and PK and all these great systems, I was like learning fast that I needed to figure out how to write for those systems. And so putting a little version of that really flat, I found the QSC was like really, for my budget, of course, it was the flattest, you know, most similar to those big sound systems. When I got to play, you know, at a huge system at Shambhala, it would be just what I heard in my studio.
Yeah. So I take it you don't have neighbors then?
I have a basement studio, and we have a home. My wife and I have 2 kids. We have a home that we own, and so I write during the day. We actually also have solar power, and so I write music, totally solar music.
Sweet.
And I don't really,
off the grid bass.
Yeah, it's cool. And so during the day, I don't have any neighbors to bother. At night, I'll rattle my kids right out of their bunk beds, and like all the plates will come off this. So like I do all my loud stuff during the day, and at night I will just create sounds and headphones and whatever, you know, kind of thing. But I work mostly 9 to 5. Yeah, I'm a dad, so.
Okay. Okay. And do you still, in your studio, do you still use reference monitors, or you only use this?
I have them set up, and I rarely turn them on anymore.
Okay.
And I have them behind me, and like it's funny, when Oscar came to my studio before this tour, he was like, I could never work like that, you know? And I just like it because once I get a really good idea, I spin around in my little computer chair and just listen and stop looking at the screen.
Yep.
And
Stop
just sit
making
there and
edits.
listen, you know, and then I'm like, oh, I know what to do. And I turn around, do something, and spin back around. So as goofy as that is, it's just really based on listening and feeling that kick just really knocking down there like 100 hertz, just, you know, and then I'll even look at an analyzer on the screen, and that's still a different experience to like just listening and going, there it is, right there, bam, you know.
You listen with your ears, not your eyes.
Yeah, that was really helpful, very helpful. And so I have studio monitors, and I don't use them very much, and then that PA just sounds killer in that little room. So when it's ready to go, and I jump up, and I'm like, if I can feel it, like I'm, you know, in the club or whatever, then I just know it's ready, and I'll bring it out, and it sounds just like that on pretty much any sound system.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Do you have to have acoustic treatment in your room?
I have some. I did it myself. I worked at a boutique kind of audio dealer for a long time, and learned a lot about studio design because we built a lot of studios for people. And so took this little basic room and used a lot of studio foam, you know, like Orlex kind of stuff, plus bass traps, plus shapes and things and fabric. It's a mixture of everything. Yeah. Sounds good down there for a little square. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And I think the other thing I've heard from you is just getting to know your room.
Oh, absolutely.
Getting to know your room and your speakers so that you know on your system, whatever that might be.
Listen to great music that you already love. Like if you hear something that sounds amazing out in a club environment or in a festival on a really good system, listen to that at home and you have to kind of compensate usually a little bit, but that'll help you get a lot closer.
Let's switch things up a little bit and start talking about software.
Cool.
I'd love to know a little bit about, you talked a bit earlier about bass sound design. I'd love to know if you have a certain number of like synths or plugins that you feel are pretty core to your sound right now, like as it exists now.
I mean, I'm a VST and hardware collecting fool. So I'm always like wanting something new, and so hardware-wise, I have Virus TI, the big full-size.
Oh yeah, with the keyboard on it and everything. Yeah.
And that thing is awesome. And I have a Moog Low Fatty, and I have some outboard stuff. I also have like some cool preamps. I have a Grace preamp and a Summit limiter and a Vintech, which is a Neve copy preamp EQ and a distressor compressor. So I have some really professional grade like outboard gear that I run synths through, which is fun.
And you find you use that when if you're sampling a synth.
Yeah, like I'll run the Moog through all that stuff, and it just goes like, you know, it gets really big. So really like that a little fatty a lot. I use it a lot. And I'm not a purist at all about that stuff, so I have just as much fun with pure software synths and think they're just as awesome, and there's actually stuff you can do, obviously, that you can't even do with hardware. So I have a ton of stuff. So what I use mostly, like in a lot of stuff, and where I at least think some really good stuff, is all the Spectrasonic stuff, the Omnisphere and Trillion. I use it all the time. Obviously, Native Instruments are really popular with everybody. I still use Massive and FM8 and even the B4 organ that they had from a really long time ago.
I love that one.
All the time, it's great. Yeah. And the piano and the electric piano in there is really good. I use Contact a little bit. And then, so that's Native Instruments. And then I really like Silent Gladiator, kind of for the new school kind of electro kind of sounds and kind of pads and stabs and stuff. And I really like this cool, I have a PC running Harmer, which is an additive.
Oh yeah,
it's awesome.
The Image Line one.
Really good.
That's
really,
badass.
Really good. It's my favorite additive.
I'm all Mac, so I'm waiting for them to come out with the Mac version.
Yeah, that's the only thing
serious.
missing. But I use a PC at home for some of my stuff, so I've got it on there, and it's awesome. Razer is a cool Mac one that you can get for Reactor. That's really good, but Harmer is just absolutely the bomb, and you can drag in pictures or like I have all these single cycle wave files you can drag in that I've been collecting. It's killer. What else is really hot? Because it just keeps kind of going for me.
What about for processing bass? You know, like after you get your raw sound, like will you sample? Like will you get like a multi-layered in a sample, like a saw wave on top, sine wave on the bottom? Are you running layered synths and then processing after that?
It depends. I mean, I really, because I made so much music that I try not to like have rules that are like, well, that's what I do.
One fixed process.
Because I'll end up with the same damn song over and over and over. So the songs I made that are really different to me are ones where I've just been like, screw it, like let me try something else, and so I do a lot of sampling, and then I'll also just stack up some synths and then run them all through like crazy stuff until I like the sound of it. I found a compressor and an EQ that I just love, and so I just use it on everything all the time. It's the DMG Compassion and Equality. It's the guy who used to work for Salknesis, is that how you pronounce it?
Oh, Synopsis?
Yes, thank you. And he went off on his own, and he wrote just like in my opinion, the king of EQ and compression software. And that compressor has a mix knob, so you can just do sidechain or excuse me, like New York compression on anything. And so I do it a lot actually, and it brings out crazy frequencies, and the EQ is just awesome, this Equality software he made. So I love that. That's on everything I do these days.
Do you find the EQ has a sound to it? Does it color?
It's
That's what you like
musical.
about it,
It's
or?
really musical, but it's flat and totally just where everything else kind of bites. This thing is just sweet right across, and it actually can mimic anything. If you want to dig deeper, you can actually make it more analog or more digital in so many different ways. But it has an analyzer built right into the visual interface.
That always helps.
And it's just a piece of cake to use, you know. And now that I've gotten a real kind of good ear for what frequencies I'm really trying to mess with, I can just go in there and it always does what I want it to do. So it's more, you know, those aren't the sexiest plugins in the world, you know, but they're the absolute bread and butter of my sound design, basically, you know. Width is important to me, so I have, what do I use for that? Oh yeah, the Vengeance producer, all the plugins that Vengeance made are amazing. And so there's the stereo, I'm just so tired. It's whatever their stereo thing. It's just like it's actually a huge interface, and it is awesome for stereo width. And
Sweet.
It's really complicated, but it does the trick, and it gives all kinds of depth and width to everything. I use it a ton.
Yeah, and you can use that to widen out, for example, the top of your bass, leaving the bottom.
Exactly.
Nice and
It's
mono.
multi-band, so you can totally leave the bass alone, or you can mono the bass really hard and widen everything else. It's really cool. It's super flexible. And I found this really cool piece of software called the One Shot Recorder, OSR. Probably out of production at this point, but you can probably find it and buy it from the dude who made it. But you can play sounds through it, and it will just set a threshold, and it'll just grab samples every time you play something. So I can sit there and just try out a preset, change everything on it, and meanwhile, this thing is just
recording
samples.
what you've done.
When you get to 128 of them, you normalize it and export it, and it sends them all to a folder named BAM, and it's like, I can make a couple thousand one-shots in an hour with that thing.
Wow.
So that's
build up your sample
totally
library.
sped up. That's huge.
No doubt.
The hard part then is going back and listening and finding the gems in there. But
same thing with
I take
doing
notes
field
as I
recordings,
go.
right?
Yeah, exactly. It's similar. It's like field recording for soft synths, you know, for me.
Yeah.
Because I'll just experiment for a while and then end up with some fluky, weird thing that happens, and I got it. I caught it, you know.
So how much of your time do you spend on sound design?
Probably half of my time, you know. Depends. If I'm not feeling creative, or like different types of creativity. If I'm not really flowing in the songwriting or like arranging kind of mode, and I know when I'm not focusing like that, I'll stop beating myself up about it and just make some cool sounds or find cool sounds. Or just, if some of the times all I can do is just listen through stuff that I already made. Oh, that's cool. Drag that into the folder goodies for next time. Then there's times where I'm just on fire and it's just time and I don't want to do any sound design, and sound design will slow me down really too much, and so all I'm doing is arranging, and I just push myself through that session, and then I have something. And so it's just kind of trying to be aware of which headspace I'm in, and it's usually one or the other. Sometimes it's somewhere in between, and very rarely can I do a session where I'm making the sounds and the arrangement and keeping it flowing and not getting sick of what I'm doing. Those end up just cluttery big piles of junk, which I then loot for the assets, you know, resave everything, preset it out, and then just delete it.
That's a great way to go about it, rather than letting these half-finished projects just sit around.
I got so many,
maybe one day I'll come
so
back
many
to that,
unfinished
you know?
things. I never like working on them. I've only fired up maybe in the history of the VibeSquaD thing, like 2 or 3 projects, and had success later after I've beat it to death and come back, you know.
Yeah. So when you find you're in the state of mind where you're like on fire and you're in arranging mode, how long would it take you to kind of do the full arrangement? Do you like to get that done in like one day or a couple of days so it's more cohesive? Or?
It's funny because I'm obsessive compulsive, probably. It's probably something you can just, you know, like see on paper. And so I used to spend almost 100 hours on every song.
Wow.
That's how long it took me.
Okay.
Just slaving and slaving and slaving.
Did you like that process, or were you like hating it along the way?
I liked it because I was forcing myself to just get it. I was like kind of just slave driving myself, you know.
Okay.
Now I really like to work quicker and smoother and not ever spend that much time. Although I still do. But the best tunes for the fans will come up to me and say, "This is my favorite," or "That's my favorite." Those songs are always things I did in one day.
Okay.
The stuff that I labor over like crazy, sometimes people will never mention whether they like those tunes to me or not. It's funny. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they're like, "Dude, that's really elaborate and stuff." It's sort of like some of the work that goes into it you'll never see. You know, it's like behind the facade of the tune or whatever. But I spent 8 hours on the snare drum or something like that. You know, it's one of those crazy things. So I'm trying to be a little more efficient. Dropping this mic. I'm trying to be a little more efficient with the way my workflow is. It's something we're really thinking about lately, and so shorting that is good. But man, you know, there's been a couple of tunes where I just was like up in the kitchen, like, all right, feeling all, let's go kill this one. Let's go. Went downstairs, just bang, 4 hours. It's at that 80% point where I'm just chopping and mixing and mastering at that point.
It's pretty much
those are
ready
the
to
tunes
go.
that when I go play them out, people hands up first time. To play that song. And those are the ones they're still requesting. It's just weird. And the songs that I have 120 saves of, sorry, I am kind of crazy. Then they, it's funny. It's like the Murphy's Law of, you know, some kind of flow thing. Like it either pops out all one piece, or it's just like I'm squishing it into this place where the whole time, you know.
Gotcha.
I finally get it though.
Gotcha.
Wrestling it down, you know.
Well, you know, every music producer, I think, struggles with their tunes at some point.
Oh, I have all kinds of, like, I'll have bouts of writer's block, and it gets really frustrating.
So how do you get over that? What's your process for getting over that?
Do sound design instead of make the tracks.
Yep.
Go for a hike, go snowboarding, play with my kids, jump on my trampoline that I bought for my kids, but I use every day.
So take breaks.
Yeah, take lots of breaks.
Yeah.
I exercise a lot because, you know, getting older and just trying to stay fit and stuff, and so that's amazing. I'll go put headphones in and just go work out at the gym. And
actually, one of my
all kinds of levels.
I put up on my Facebook page that I was going to be doing this interview, and I said, hey, if anybody has any questions for these guys, you know, let me know. And a lot of these questions are ones that members have asked. I remember one of the guys was asking you for some workout tips, so you must be doing something right. You just go and lift your bass bends, right?
Well, I did gymnastics as a kid. That was my thing, you know. That was my sport that I did. So I was a gymnast for like 13 years or
Killer.
so. Just really like to be fit and strong and stuff, and I find that there's a mental connection to that, and so I every time I make an album, the finish point, I'm at like the gym listening to the album over and over, and I got so many clear ideas when I come home. I'm like, what's wrong with it? I just delete like 16 bars here, or like just get rid of this one part, you know, make big decisions listening in that headspace, because it's not very mental, it's more physical, and I just be like sweating and grooving, and it's funny, and people will kind of make fun of me or whatever in my scene because everyone's like younger and partying and stuff. But I exercise a lot, and I find it has a good connection with the creative process and with my focus. And then, you know, I'm also get depressed a lot. I've always been kind of depressive, and people are always like, "You're so smiley" and everything. But the exercise thing is like how I keep it. That
helps keep the vibe high,
clean. Yeah. Just kind of keep me from getting all stuck. So yeah, half the time when I'm stuck and I can't work on a tune, I'm out the door, jump on my bike, do something.
Yeah, so you won't try and force it.
Take myself out for sushi.
You seem like a guy who's built up enough wisdom where you know your process and you're self-aware enough to say, you know what, today's not going to be the day, or this is not going to be the moment where I write the tune. Let's take a break and re-engage.
I haven't had success beating myself up. After that point, if it's really just pulling teeth, I haven't gotten it by force, you know, to be any better. So better for me to just get my head together, you know, or do something else, you know. And so not thinking, like, just doing something physical always works, you know.
Fantastic. One thing I was curious about is when you do sit down to do an arrangement, you have an idea in your head. Is that how it starts? Or do you sometimes just sit down and say, you know what, I'm inspired, I'm going to write? And where does the tune start? Like, do you start with the beats, the bass, or is it random?
Right. Different every time. And, you know, used to be when I played guitar more and wrote songs more and was in more of a live instrument band mindset, it would all be in the head first. And then I'd be humming a melody and I'd try to chase that down. Now, I'll start out with like a real simple kick and snare thing and just start fitting stuff together. Or I'll start out with a synth line that is just some cool thing I'll be playing and just be like digging on it and be like, okay, loop that, and then kind of redo it better and then keep working from there. Sometimes I have no idea how this stuff starts. You know, sometimes it's just a hodgepodge of like trying stuff, and then here I go, it just catches fire and I start getting ideas. And But these days, it's not like I have a really focused, like I know the tune, but a couple of them I have, you know, like a couple of them I've got it in my head and I'm just trying to chase that, you know. It's different. It's different all the time.
Well, it's good to hear because sometimes I think sometimes people hear, oh, you have to start with this or you have to start with that. And
no rules, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I think, you know, Oscar told me he doesn't start with the drums. I always start with the drums. So I started asking my friends what they're doing and then just trying that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, you know. Works for me to have drums first usually. A really killer kick and snare and a little pattern or something that gets me excited and I can hear where all the other parts are going to go.
Yep.
Sometimes I've started something without a beat, and by the time I put the beat in there, it just feels dorky all of a sudden. It goes from feeling like it's got all this cool feel to where it's like dirk, so you know, that's not good. So I think I have more success with drums first, but I would never, you know, fix that into some kind of a rule or technique, you know?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Any tips for folks to create really fat and full sounding percussion, whether it's the techniques of how to layer things or processing or some things maybe that you could share there?
Well, there's some really simple things, you know, as overly obviously, you know, overstating the obvious as it sounds, using good sound source material as opposed to trying to, like, you know, polish the turd or whatever.
Yep.
Is just, you know, I did that. I used crappy sounds and I would just be less worried about that. And I'll fix it later. I'll EQ it, I'll shape it and compress it. It'll stick two together. And there's nothing like a kick drum where you're like, oh, that's awesome. Wait, oh, okay, that's it. You know,
yeah.
It doesn't mean anything.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, and more gold in, gold out. You know, it's like you'll always end up with just a bunch of mud in there if you start with muddy sounds. So if you have sounds that each thing is just awesome and could almost stand on its own, like that snare is so nice, I just want to hear it over and over. Then you'll find a way to fit that in without a whole bunch of magic tricks.
Okay.
You know. But layers really help when you get into, you know, sometimes a kick snare and a hi-hat by its own will sound very in the box kind of drum machine, like just typical, and what the producer's trying to go for is something a little more magical than that, and a little bit of dirt or like just doubling everything with just like some weird little frequencies that are buried in there, you know, or like a loop that's just junk that doesn't have good sound quality on top of something pristine and clear and awesome. Sometimes that's the magic trick. So I think that once you get something going, a little bit of experimentation, like double the part and then just start flipping through different sounds and see if anything really sits nicely with it. But, you know, I always have, and I go for the same kicks and snares every time. I don't ever use the same ones ever in two tunes, but they all sound the same. Yeah. It's funny. I just like big, round, punchy kicks that have a fundamental tone at about 100 hertz. And I really love like those, almost like the old Lindrum, like snares that have a pronounced 200 bump that's just like, boom, it gives you a lot of chest punch, you know, so like the, you know, the kick and the snare is kind of really punchy and big and round and tough, and that's what I like that. And claps, I like those big crunk, like slap loose kind of four claps that a couple of them fall off the edges kind of thing, and I like that. So I gravitate toward those type of sounds a lot. Even if I make them completely from scratch, they tend to be in the same frequency ranges. And
okay, where are most of your source sounds coming from?
I synthesize a lot of them myself. That Vengeance software, there's one called Metrum that's really good, and you can build kick drums with that, and it's awesome, actually. I use that a lot. And snares, I collect stupid amounts of libraries, and there's some really good sample creators that I support, and I purchase their sample packs. I'm not big into loops, but I love one-shots, and I found a lot of success with the Gold Baby stuff. Big ups to Dude. He's really good.
For sure.
And you know, everyone uses Vengeance stuff, and I sure do, because there's occasional. It's just they get a great sound over there. So, but I don't. You know, it's not like I really don't want to. I'm not going for sameness, you know, I'm not really trying to match the sound of the day, but there's just some people that make high fidelity, big, huge sounds that are just
Really
clean
crisp.
and really well made. The Wave Alchemy, those guys are killer, and I use their stuff all the time. They have a drum tools pack that's really good. So, you know, and that's not something I try to keep toward to myself, you know what I mean? That's obviously some stuff I haven't made myself, but I'll sit there making sounds to come up with what these guys have already done. So sometimes I decided that it's, in my opinion, once it's in the process and you're using it in a musical context and you're choosing between one of 1,000 things on each one of these packs, you know, and none of them are loops, I feel like that's still the same thing as me sitting there and making it in a way because I'm trying to get that sound. I'm like, oh, that's what I was absolutely hearing in my head. There it is. I'm going to use that one. I still mess with it and fuck with it and put it into distortion and compress it with those compassion and all that.
Make it your own.
Yeah,
every
I still
single
got all
time.
my tricks to it. Yeah.
Are you layering things up in samplers when you do that, or do you do your drums in audio?
I do. I use samplers. Like if I'm in Reason, everything goes into those NNXT samplers.
Yeah.
In Ableton, I use sampler.
Yep.
Or simpler, you know, but sampler, kind of the way Il Gates does. The way
128s and dial them around.
Yeah, I'll have a bunch of those set up in Ableton, and then in Cubase, I'll use different things, but Cubase for some reason I end up drawing them in or bringing in audio just straight to the thing, and then you know, literally like copy and pasting it where I want it to go on the grid.
Yep.
As audio. Yeah.
Cool.
So it's a mixture of those kind of things.
One key thing I've noticed about your tunes is it's common with a lot of people who are writing bass music is just like this vicious swing. You know, it's all about swing. And I'll get a lot of people asking me like, you know, well, how do I do that? It seems like a lot of work to kind of like copy and paste and move things around. You know, is there just some type of MIDI swing template I could use or a groove function? Maybe you could just walk us through how you approach swing in your tracks.
Well, feel is like some voodoo business, you know, because like there's just some tunes that are so simple, like deceptively simple, and they're like ridiculously perfectly sitting in the pocket. Somehow, like this one sound is just hanging a little early or late, and I go, as the listener, I go, hell yeah, like that thing makes me want to bob my head really hard. So there is no true like, oh, just use the MPC's 51% setting and it's perfect. You know, a lot of the times I'm like sit there and I'll just move it late. You know, get that snare a little late. It's like a live drummer. You know, there's some dudes, like you listen to some funk or like really good reggae music or like certain things like Led Zeppelin or Ringo Starr or like there's certain dudes that can play everything just late. Like I just recently listened to some Beatles music that I hadn't listened to in years, and because I used to be really a fan of like fancy drumming and stuff like that, and he was always a little simple for my taste, my younger naiveness and wanting like more is better. And I just listened to some Beatles stuff, and his fills are so sick, and he'll just be like when it just falls like so in the pocket that it works, you know, and it makes the song so much better. So that'll happen to me a lot. Like any drum fills that I do, I'm sitting there scooting stuff until it's like, oh, you know, like Pink Floyd kind of late, you know, that I love that.
So you're all like off groove, nudging things around very carefully to get the perfect kind of feel.
Absolutely. I mean, I quantize the one, and I quantize simply sometimes the snare, you know, and the hats. Sometimes I just freestyle that.
They can be a little
play
messy.
it in, and if I get a good feel, like I'm like, let's not mess with it, you know. So, but there's, you know, the human feel. It's hard to capture with a computer, so you do have to scoot stuff around. And if you get a 2-bar loop that's just like that thing is nasty, then copy it through, and go and move your other stuff around to match that, and you'd be surprised like the whole thing swings really hard in a natural way.
Yeah.
You know, but I came from playing guitar and bass and keyboards and always in a really super swinging like P-Funk, James Brown kind of Prince, like that stuff was always gets me off. So some bands people would accuse me of like never be able to play a straight thing like Latin or like anything that goes like supposed to be straight. Like quit swinging all of this stuff, because I tend to swing everything, you know. But you know, like good hip hop is just always in the pocket because like Jay Dilla would do it by hand, you know? I mean, there's just something to be said for like human feel. So I do a lot of stuff where I just play it in, you know?
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for the time.
Yeah.
We'll wrap up in a minute.
Cool.
Just before we do, I'd love to give people a way to keep in touch with you. What's the best way to like keep up to speed on everything that's going on in your career, your releases, your tours?
Yeah. You know, I've been digging Twitter lately. I've been on there a bunch, and so like on the day-to-day style, that's a good way to get in touch with me or say what's up, or I respond. I like to read it. You know, and I also, you know, if there's some really timely information that like I'm playing early tonight, sorry the show's running early or whatever, I'll put it in like that. And my Facebook, the VibeSquaD Facebook page is where you'll find a lot of like show information, and my website is just VibeSquaD.com.
Killer.
And I just started BassLove.com, which is going to be for my store, which will be the BassLove hats, you know, with the logo with the two bass clefs that I used for my first record, and hats and shirts, and I'm trying to figure out how to do some skate shoes and skateboard decks and some stuff like that. So that's BassLove.com. Okay. But yeah, I'm kind of easy to find. If you just throw VibeSquaD in a Google search, you get all that stuff in a big list. So
yep.
Yeah.
And what's coming up next for you? I mean, you're just wrapping up this tour, so what's the
wrapping up
next
this
move?
tour, and I'm so exhausted and just totally beat myself up in this tour. So I'm gonna go home and like rock back and forth in the fetal position for like a whole 15 minutes, because my wife will be like, okay, how about helping with the kids, and then dinner should be ready at 5. So, you know, I'm gonna go home and chill out for just a second with my family, and then I have a new EP that's all ready to go, so that'll be coming out in about a week, and it's called Bionic Hijinks. So I'm stoked on that.
Killer. Are you doing that one via Bandcamp or on a label, or?
It's all on VibeSquaD Recordings, which is my label, but it will come out simultaneously on Bandcamp, Beatport, iTunes, and all the usual suspects like that. Some remixes will be on some blogs, and I like to do it myself. I'm really kind of turned off from trying to go glossy marketing and hype and stuff, and it just doesn't work for me as well as it does for other people. And so just trying to simplify my situation and really focus on good music and getting it directly to my fans that are actually paying attention to what I'm doing.
The people that come and follow you.
As opposed to try to like sell it to people that are just into music in general. You know, I hope they come along and want to hear it, but I don't have the energy to really go in that direction. So I keep my label kind of like just real local and home base, you know. But I'm really inspired after this tour to pick up my guitar and bass and keyboard and stuff again, and sing and rap and make a whole album that is, of course, really produced and has all kinds of my VibeSquaD electronic, you know. I'm never going to be able to separate that, really. But not be afraid to go into what I did for 20 years, which is play live instruments and use my voice a lot more and write chords and get into some soul music and funk and stuff, that not have to always serve the dance floor kind of thing. So my next big album project will be that, and it's going to be going very deep, full-length album of my everything, like anything, like genre, not genre specific and not style specific, but all me and my sound, and you know, kind of like that tune I have called Dawn Patrol, and you know, like Shine, and some of the stuff where I'm singing, like just go further with that, not be afraid to break out the guitar, play more live bass, not during my sets probably, because I haven't figured out how to work that out, but in the studio for sure. So the next thing's going to be a real diversion from what people expect from me, and I'm hoping they like it. But I have a lot to say in that department. It's musically, so I'm excited to really dig in hard on that. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
Real different, yeah.
Excellent.
Cool.
You mentioned something there that reminded me of one more question I wanted to ask you, and that's you're in a situation where you have a family, you have kids, you have a house, and you still find a way to make that work while touring. And I was really curious for other people out there who might be in similar situations. How do you find the balance between, you know?
It's hard. I won't lie. It is hard, and it has taken years of finessing that balance. I think this tour was too long for me, and it's mostly for my family and for me. I'm exhausted. My wife's exhausted. My kids are. My wife said, my kids are like, Dad, Daddy's coming home tomorrow. Oh, thank goodness. Like they're really expressing that I'm not there. So I want to adjust that back a little bit and not do long. I wanted to try a long linear tour and bring sound, bring lights, do this big tour. But I'm gonna probably, I'm still working on it. So now I'm gonna back that off and do a little bit more weekend warrior stuff. Maybe add someone to help me support, like a sound man or something, so that I could, because I do like controlling the consistency of everything better. That's what's hard about just going one here, one there, is that I don't always know everybody on the technical side of the thing and the production side, and so I have to work with everybody every night. But I really like to be home more, I think, nowadays. It's just a balance. So it's a hard thing, it's hard for families to do. And my wife's been incredibly supportive. My kids are awesome, and they're really into the music too. Yeah. Jeremy's already producing beats like in Ableton, and they're wicked. 11, and he's wicked. I mean, he's really into Deadmau5 and Skrillex and Kill the Noise and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And he canes that stuff, man. He's got really beautiful melodies. He's been playing piano lessons for 5 years, so chords, melodies. But then he goes to his drops, and they're just full balls out, bro. Step maniac.
Can we hear any of his music somewhere?
Well, not yet, because he's got like 5 or 6 tracks, and he's been telling me on the phone that he wants me to come home and help him mix and master them. And I'm trying not to exploit, like, oh, it's my kid, listen to my kid, and then have him be all of a sudden 12 years old with this expectation that he's going to have to. I want it to be fun, and I never wanted him to have to feel like he's got to follow my footsteps. But he just happens to be doing it because he loves it. And so awesome. I'll probably hook him up with like a little private SoundCloud for his buddies to
check out his tunes.
Yeah. More than my friends to be like, wow. I just always felt like that's just like, it's not cool to like
put him on display.
Yeah, you let him, when he's ready for that, and he's like, Dad, I want everybody to hear this, I'll help him with that process, of course, because that's my dude. And my other little son, Simon, he's 7, and he is already got the bass face, man. He's just like, so he's got it. They can both dance really good, and they're both just like, the music comes on, and they're like, that's so cute and funny, and it's hilarious. And we literally throw the music on in the living room, we're cooking food, and they'll just freak out and break dance and said,
solid.
Awesome. I freestyle rhyme when I make eggs in the morning, and they laugh, and they can both beatbox like crazy, fast.
Super
like
musical household you got going on.
Yeah, we have a piano in the living room, and have a iMac with Ableton right in the living room, and they fight over it instead of video games. That's what they're doing.
Amazing.
It's awesome.
Well, that is an inspiration, my friend.
I'm inspired. Yeah. On a daily basis. I'm like, oh man, that's a really good chord progression. He's like, yeah, I've been saving this one, He's cool. So that kind of feeds me back the energy, and whenever I get a little tired of myself, and I'm like, and these guys are killing it, and go upstairs and mess with them, and they're just like jumping around, and all their little buddies want to come over now. Like, your dad's cool, he's got a studio, so like now all his little homies and skater buddies want to come over and make beats. Funny.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I know there's a lot of places you could be right now, and there's a lot of producers out there who just don't see the interest in supporting people who want to grow and people who are just stepping into it. And so, just so you know, the impact that this will have, this video will be viewed thousands of times. It's going to continue to do good for a long time.
Oh, that's great.
And a lot of people are going to see it and be able to learn tons from what you've shared. So really appreciate your openness, and you're willing to sit down and be super real and authentic with us. So
yeah, well, you know what? A lot of people did that for me. I've had a lot of great support from my peers and friends, and I've humbled myself and said, like, hey, how can I make this better? Can I get your opinion? And I've had a lot of my heroes actually turn to me and say, man, I'm really digging what you're doing, and that inspires me. And so it's a process. And so, I encourage anyone who likes what I'm doing to don't be scared to reach out to me, because, I'm in this for all kinds of reasons, and I'm over myself. It's like, I'm not trying to be a rock star. I'm trying to make music and make people feel good, and that's the goal. And so if that's what you're doing, then this is a, otherwise we're all alone in our basement and being nerds, so holler at your boy.
Sweet. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks, man.